What's up, guys? Here's my predictions for UFC fight night happening in Auckland this Saturday, about 3 hours earlier than your usual fight card. And I love cards that happen earlier in the day. Also, because of this, we're able to watch the big boxing fight after the UFC card. So great night for fight fans. And the card isn't that bad. Now, there are a lot of local talent, a lot of prospects, a lot of fighters with not many fights in their careers. But the one that really intrigues me more than everything else besides the main event is Jake Matthews versus Emil Meek. Now, Emil Meek is making his return after a 1.5-year layoff for whatever reason. I really don't know why he didn't fight for so long, but he's coming off a 2-loss streak as well as a big layoff. So that in itself is going to put him at a disadvantage against the much younger, much more active Jake Matthews, who is constantly just getting better, especially as he went up from 155 to 170. He is going to be a bit smaller than Emil Meek, where Emil has before fought in the cage at 189 pounds. That is fight night weight, while Jake Matthews walks around at like 183 pounds. So Emil Meek walking around is probably much more than 189. He's going to be a bit bigger than Jake Matthews, but I believe Matthews is overall the more technical and skilled fighter. To call Emil Meek wild is a bit of an understatement. Flying knees out of nowhere, lunging, looping punches around guards. Nothing super technical, although he has a very explosive guillotine choke, but it tends to be his biggest takedown defense. He's not the best at sprawling, he's not the best at just stuffing takedowns, he's not the most technical wrestler, and the way he goes about to defend wrestling is by striking at your head with elbows or going for the guillotine. That tends to make him hit the ground, and then he starts getting controlled, like in his last 2 fights. Kamaru Usman and Fabinski both completely controlled Emil Meek on the ground. Meek is okay at holding guard. He's pretty good at putting in the butterfly hooks, but as soon as you pass the guard, and sometimes he waits until half guard, Emil Meek usually turns over and tries to just stand up. Now, fighting a guy like Jake Matthews, he's not a traditional wrestler. He's a lot better with submissions than Usman and Fabinski are. So, if Emil Meek ever gets taken to the ground, which I think should be the game plan for Jake Matthews, I think turning over the way he does, going for guillotines the way he does, just risking so much can eventually catch him into a submission. Matthews has lightning quick guillotines as well, very good at establishing positions. Matthews is a bit of a risk taker as well. You saw that in his Anthony Rocco Martin fight, where he kind of got submitted for being a little bit too risk taking. But I believe if it gets to the ground, Matthews is most likely going to win every single exchange and could possibly just win the entire fight through that. Now, how's this go on the feet? Because Emil Meek doesn't do anything too orthodox, I don't think it's going to get to Matthews that much unless Matthews lunges in a bit too far and gets countered by some looping punch or something like that. Matthews is usually the fighter that backs up. That's going to be bad on his part because Emil Meek is a lot better moving forward than moving backward, but because he's fighting wrestlers, he's forced to move backwards. In this fight, he's most likely going to be the one moving forward, so we will see a more effective and dangerous Emil Meek, possibly if the layoff doesn't take effect. But the thing about Matthews is he's a lot faster than Emil Meek. He tends to be a little bit reliant on the right hand, especially darting in with it, as well as the right overhand as a counter. Can that catch Emil Meek? I can see it, but Meek has an insanely good chin. He's a wild man at heart. Mentality's like that as well. If he gets hit, he just has fun with it and keeps going forward with it. But my prediction for this fight, I am going to go Jake Matthews. The only way I could really see Matthews losing this fight is if he makes a huge rookie mistake. Gets a little bit too overconfident like he did against Anthony Rocco Martin. Started taunting him and stuff like that, lunging in there with punches and takedowns. Felt himself a little bit too much in that fight. If he does that against Emil Meek, it could be lights out. So I am going to go Jake Matthews. And I am actually going to stick with a decision win. I can see a finish. I can see a submission win especially. But I just think Emil Meek is just too tough at the end of the day. And then we go to the main event. Paul Felder versus Dan Hooker. Very underrated fight. Great striking matchup. I believe Dan Hooker is a better BJJ fighter, but Paul Felder seems to be better with positions on the ground, especially when you saw him fight Charles Oliveira. Charles Oliveira, as we all know, is a very, very slick submission artist, and Paul Felder finished him with ground and pound. But this fight is most likely not going to go to the ground. They both have much better takedown defense than their wrestling offense. So I see this fight being a standing contest. Some clinch work, especially on Paul Felder's part. He has a bit of an advantage. He's a little bit more traditional with his Muay Thai. I will also say that I think Paul Felder is going to come into this fight a lot fresher with his chin. Hooker got hurt by James Vick once, and he got hurt multiple times by Edson Barboza. Paul Felder, although he has taken some damage in his career, he has never really looked visibly shaken by the damage. He's never looked concussed. He's never looked out of it on the feet like we have seen Dan Hooker a couple times. I also do believe that Paul Felder has a little bit more knockout power. I believe he's a little bit faster. His spinning techniques are also going to prevail, just like Edson Barboza's did. But the reason reach of Hooker can pose some problems for Paul Felder, right? And especially the way Hooker throws punches. His punches deceptively just reach around guards. Like, he's landing in these angles you don't see the punches coming from. He's throwing his arm one way and you're getting hit in an angle that you didn't expect. His combinations are also a bit offsetting, just like the one he knocked out James Vick with, right? He kind of faked the right hand to get Vick to extend his hands forward, took a little bit of an angle with the left hook. Like, he'll do stuff like that. But the thing about Paul Felder is, Felder doesn't move too much, right? So he's going to be in a set, fixed placement the entire fight. He's a bit of a plotter, but because of that, he acts like a brick wall. He wants you to exchange with him. And generally, Hooker is able to establish a pace, be more comfortable, and set a rhythm when opponents start moving away from him, such as Eli Quinta, Ross Pearson, Jim Miller, etc., etc. And if Dan Hooker goes and lunges with punches like he did against James Vick, although Vick is a lot taller and longer, which probably showed why Dan Hooker had to do something like that, if he does something similar to Paul Felder, knees, I believe Felder is going to counter him, either with a spinning back fist. He has a really good right straight, left hook. His roundhouse kicks, I believe, are going to be a problem for Dan Hooker, especially to the legs. Hooker doesn't defend too many leg kicks. And really the way I could see Dan Hooker winning this fight is just keeping it at a range and not trying to look for the knockout. Another thing about Dan Hooker is he keeps his hands a bit low, right? And he cannot do that against a guy like Paul Felder, because Felder throws very unpredictable techniques. Talking about his spins, man, he will counter you with that spinning back fist. He will spin away from your strikes, and that can lead up to other counterattacks that you fall into. So my prediction for this fight, I am going to go with Paul Felder. I think leg kicks are going to be established early. I think it's going to force Dan Hooker to exchange with them just a little bit, and I think Felder is going to win at those. He's going to land some meaningful shots, and I actually see this fight ending with a 4th round TKO. I can see the fight hitting the ground once because of maybe from leg damage as well as body damage, dropping Dan Hooker and possibly getting finished with ground and pound. And then we look at the betting odds here. So nothing I really disagree with too much. The Tukugov versus Aguilar fight is very close. The one that probably stands out the most, I don't disagree with it too much, but just a little bit, is the Carolina versus Zhao Nan fight. It is a bit sad to see how far Carolina has fallen. From title contender rocking Joanna to just can't win a fight. She is a bit older as well. I don't think the odds should be that far apart. I think Zhao Nan should be a favorite, but definitely not minus 250. So I hope you guys enjoyed the predictions, and if you did, make sure to have a thumbs up. If you enjoyed my content, make sure to subscribe. And again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.